As dawn breaks over the African veldt, something impossible has happened. 150 British soldiers are still alive. 4,000 Zulu warriors are withdrawing in respectful silence, having witnessed courage they didn't think was possible. But 12 hours earlier, this ending seemed like a fantasy. January 22nd, 1879. What started as an ordinary day at a remote supply depot called Rorke's Drift was about to become one of the most extraordinary nights in military history. A night when courage would triumph over numbers, and ordinary men would achieve the impossible. But first, they had to survive a disaster that would test everything they believed about war. Earlier that same day, just 12 miles away, 20,000 Zulu warriors had surrounded and annihilated an entire British column of 1,700 men at Isandlwana. The Zulu military machine had proven that rifles and red coats didn't make you invincible. Using their devastating Horns of the Beast formation, they had encircled seasoned British troops like a closing fist, turning modern weapons into useless metal when overwhelmed by sheer tactical brilliance. As the sun set on that blood-soaked battlefield, a Zulu impi of 4,000 warriors broke away from the main force. They were coming to finish what Isandlwana had started, but they had no idea what they were about to face. The mission station wasn't a fortress. It was barely even a proper military post. Just 2 single-story buildings, a storehouse and a hospital, connected by a low stone wall and surrounded by nothing but open African bush. The structures were built for Swedish missionaries, not soldiers. The walls were designed to keep out wild animals, not warriors. The garrison was a mixed bag of soldiers from the 24th Regiment of Foot, most of them there by accident rather than design. They were supply troops, engineers, hospital orderlies, cooks and clerks. Men who had signed up to serve the Empire, not to die in some forgotten corner of Africa. Men who had never expected to find themselves in the fight of their lives. When word reached Rorke's Drift that the Zulu army was approaching, the man suddenly in command faced an impossible decision. Lieutenant John Chard of the Royal Engineers wasn't even an infantry officer. He was a quiet, methodical man whose job was building bridges, not defending them. He had arrived at the station that very morning on a routine inspection of the pontoon bridge across the Buffalo River. By pure accident of seniority over Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead, he was suddenly responsible for every life in the garrison. Logic said retreat, pride said fight. What happened next would shock even the Zulu commanders. Chard chose to fight. The afternoon became a frantic scramble to turn a mission station into a fortress. Soldiers hauled heavy mealie bags from the storehouse, each sack weighing over 100 pounds, stacking them into improvised ramparts. The corn-filled bags were dense enough to stop spears and even rifle bullets, but moving them in the African heat was back-breaking work. Biscuit boxes, furniture, water barrels, anything that could stop a spear or a bullet was dragged into position. They knocked loopholes through the walls of the buildings and barricaded the windows with whatever they could find. Mattresses, tables, even religious books were pressed into service as barriers. The hospital, with its sick and wounded patients, became a fortress within a fortress. Men too ill to fight were given rifles anyway, because every shot might matter. The building had multiple rooms connected by narrow doorways, creating a potential death trap if the Zulu broke through. But it also meant defenders could fall back room by room, making the enemy pay for every inch. If you've been captivated by this incredible story of courage against impossible odds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into history's most extraordinary battles. And let us know in the comments which historical last stand you think we should cover next. As the sun began to set, the sound that chilled every British soldier to the bone echoed across the veldt. The war chants of approaching Zulu warriors, growing louder and closer with each passing minute. The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic, and terrifying. It was the sound of 4,000 voices united in purpose, chanting the praise songs of their ancestors and calling on their gods for victory. Through field glasses, the defenders could see them coming. Not hundreds, but thousands. A black tide of shields and spears moving with deadly purpose toward their tiny outpost. The setting sun reflected off their cowhide shields and iron-tipped assegais, creating a glittering wave of weapons stretching across the horizon. But that was before they discovered something terrifying. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the attack began. The Zulu came in waves, using their traditional horns of the beast formation that had conquered kingdoms and broken armies across southern Africa. The main force, the chest of the beast, charged straight at the front wall while flanking groups, the horns, swept around both sides, trying to encircle the position completely. Their discipline was terrifying. These weren't wild savages as British propaganda portrayed them, but professional warriors executing complex battle plans with precision and courage. Each warrior carried an oval shield made of cowhide and a bundle of assegais, short stabbing spears designed for close combat. They moved in perfect coordination, responding to signals from their indunas, their war leaders, who directed the attack with tactical brilliance. The first shock was the sheer volume of noise. War cries, rifle fire, the crack of spears against shields, shouted orders in English and Zulu. The sound was deafening, disorienting, designed to break the morale of defenders before the physical assault even reached them. The British could hear individual voices in the chaos, warriors calling out challenges, officers shouting commands, the wounded crying out in pain and rage. But the British held their fire until the attackers were close, then unleashed disciplined volleys that cut down the front ranks of charging warriors. The Martini Henry rifle was a powerful weapon, a single-shot breech-loader that could kill at 400 yards and punch through a shield at close range. But it was single-shot, and the British had been trained to fire in coordinated volleys, creating a wall of lead that could stop any charge. After each volley, there were precious seconds of vulnerability as soldiers reloaded, working the lever action and sliding new cartridges into the breech. Seconds when Zulu warriors could close the gap and leap over the makeshift walls. The fighting became hand-to-hand almost immediately. British bayonets against Zulu spears and clubs in the gathering darkness. Men grappled and died just feet apart, close enough to see each other's faces, close enough to smell the fear and sweat and gunpowder. The mealy bag walls that had seemed so solid during construction proved dangerously low, barely chest-high to a standing man. Warriors could leap over them, forcing defenders to fight for every inch of ground. Zulu assegais were designed for close combat, short enough to use in confined spaces, sharp enough to punch through military uniforms and find the flesh beneath. That's when the real nightmare began. The hospital became a scene of desperate heroism, unlike anything in military history. Patients too sick or wounded to move lay helpless in their beds as Zulu warriors broke through the walls and windows. The building became a maze of individual battles, with defenders fighting room to room, corridor to corridor. Private Henry Hook, originally assigned as a hospital orderly, found himself fighting a running battle through the building, moving patients from room to room as each position became untenable. He used his bayonet to hack through the mud brick walls, creating escape routes for men who couldn't walk. The blade sparked against hidden stones in the wall, his hands bleeding from the rough work, but he never stopped. For hours, he held sections of the building almost single-handedly, his rifle fire the only thing standing between wounded soldiers and certain death. Hook's actions would later earn him the Victoria Cross, but in the moment, he was just a man trying to save lives. He carried wounded soldiers on his back, dragged unconscious men through holes in walls, and fought off Zulu warriors with nothing but a bayonet when his ammunition ran low. The hospital corridors filled with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder, making it almost impossible to see. Men fought by sound and instinct, firing at shadows and movement. The first assault was repelled, but barely. Bodies lay thick around the perimeter walls, Zulu and British alike. The defenders had held, but they had also learned a terrifying lesson. The enemy wasn't going to give up. This was just the beginning. The Zulu withdrawal was orderly, disciplined, the warriors regrouping for another attack. In the brief respite, British soldiers counted their ammunition, tended their wounded, and tried to repair the damage to their makeshift fortifications. What happened next changed everything. As darkness fell completely, the attacks intensified. Without the sun to guide them, the fighting became a confused hell of muzzle flashes and war cries. Soldiers fired at shadows and sounds, never sure if the next spear thrust would come from in front or behind. The muzzle flashes from their rifles lit up their faces like demons in the darkness, making them perfect targets for Zulu marksmen who had captured British weapons at Isandlwana. The Zulu took advantage of the darkness, infiltrating the defenses and forcing the British to abandon sections of the perimeter. Warriors would crawl forward during the chaos of battle, slipping between the melee bags and striking at defenders from behind. The defenders learned to fight by sound, the whistle of an assegai through the air, the soft thud of bare feet on dirt, the distinctive click of a Martini Henry being loaded. In the darkness, every noise could mean life or death. British soldiers developed an almost supernatural awareness, spinning to fire at threats they sensed rather than saw. Chard made the agonizing decision to abandon the hospital. The building was becoming impossible to defend, and every minute they stayed meant more casualties. Under covering fire from the main position, the last defenders evacuated whoever they could carry and fell back to a tighter perimeter around the storehouse. They left behind men too wounded to move, knowing they were condemning them to death. The decision haunted Chard for the rest of his life, but it was the right call. The hospital was a death trap, and holding it would have cost them the entire battle. But they had no idea their real test was still 6 hours away. The new defensive line was tiny, just a rough rectangle of melee bags around the storehouse building. But it was easier to defend, and the soldiers could concentrate their fire more effectively. The perimeter was now small enough that every man could see every other defender, allowing for better coordination and mutual support. Still, the pressure was relentless. Wave after wave of Zulu warriors charged the walls, and each attack seemed to bring them closer to breaking through. The defenders were learning the brutal mathematics of siege warfare. Every attack cost them ammunition they couldn't replace. Every casualty weakened their line. Every hour brought them closer to exhaustion. Throughout the long night, individual acts of heroism kept the defense alive. Surgeon Reynolds moved among the wounded completely exposed to enemy fire, treating injuries and keeping men in the fight. His medical bag became as important as any rifle, because every man he saved was another rifle on the line. Colour Sergeant Frank Bourne was everywhere at once, steadying nervous soldiers, directing fire, plugging gaps in the line wherever they appeared. His calm voice in the chaos became a lifeline for men who had never imagined combat like this. At only 24 years old, Bourne was younger than many of the men he commanded, but his experience and steady nerves made him the backbone of the defense. The Zulu showed their own brand of courage. Again and again, warriors charged into rifle fire that they knew would kill them, trying to break the British line through sheer determination. When their assegai spears proved too short to reach over the walls, they grabbed them by the points and used them as clubs, cutting their own hands in the process. When ammunition ran low, they threw stones and fought with their bare hands, refusing to give up ground they had paid for with blood. Their war cries never faltered, even as their losses mounted. They fought not just for victory, but for honor, for their king, for their way of life. By midnight, the British perimeter had shrunk to its smallest size. Less than 50 yards of wall defended by exhausted men who had been fighting for 8 hours straight. Ammunition was running dangerously low, with soldiers counting each cartridge like gold. Medical supplies were almost gone, forcing Reynolds to perform surgery with improvised tools and torn clothing for bandages. The hospital was in flames, lighting up the battlefield like a massive torch and eliminating any hope of using darkness for concealment. The fire cast dancing shadows across the walls, making it even harder to distinguish between friend and enemy. But something remarkable was happening. Instead of breaking under the impossible pressure, the defenders were finding reserves of courage they didn't know they possessed. Men who had been clerks and storekeepers that morning were fighting like seasoned veterans. They were discovering what soldiers throughout history have learned in desperate moments, that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when everything depends on them. Fear was still there, but it was overwhelmed by determination, by loyalty to the men fighting beside them, by a refusal to give up that went beyond rational thought. Then came the moment that would save them all. Ready to dive deeper into more incredible stories of courage and determination. Share this video with anyone who loves learning about history's most amazing battles, and don't forget to hit that like button if this story of impossible odds and incredible bravery has inspired you. The attacks continued through the night, but gradually the defenders began to notice a change. The war cries were less frequent, the charges less coordinated. The Zulu were suffering enormous casualties against the concentrated firepower of the British rifles, and even their incredible courage had limits. The mathematical reality of the battle was becoming clear. The British couldn't be dislodged without losses that would cripple the attacking force. But the Zulu had one more card to play. As dawn approached, the final assault came. Hundreds of warriors charged the tiny perimeter in what everyone knew would be the decisive moment. This was it. Everything would be decided in the next few minutes. If the British line broke now, there would be no second chances. No ammunition for another fight. No time to reorganize. No miraculous rescue coming over the hill. The volley that met this last charge was the most disciplined of the entire night. Every shot counted. Every bullet had to find its target. The British had learned to make their ammunition count, to wait for the perfect moment, to fire only when they could see the whites of their enemies' eyes. For a moment that seemed to last forever, Zulu warriors and British soldiers fought hand to hand along the mealy bag walls. Bayonets crossed with spears, shields clashed against rifle stocks. Men died within arm's reach of each other, falling together in the final dance of desperate combat. The sound was indescribable. Steel against steel, flesh against flesh, the screams of wounded men and the shouts of those still fighting. Time seemed suspended, as if the entire world had paused to watch this moment of ultimate testing. Then, in an instant that changed everything, the balance shifted. And then suddenly, it was over. As the first light of dawn broke across the African veldt, the Zulu warriors began to withdraw. Not in defeat, but with the measured discipline of professional soldiers who had tested their enemy and found them worthy of respect. They had lost hundreds of men against a position defended by barely 150 British soldiers, and they recognized courage when they saw it. The withdrawal was as organized as the attack had been, warriors helping their wounded comrades, carrying their dead, maintaining their dignity even in retreat. The British had won, but the cost was staggering in its own way. Not in lives lost, their casualties were remarkably light, but in the transformation of ordinary men into legends. 11 Victoria Crosses would be awarded for the defense of Rorke's Drift, the most ever given for a single action. Men like Private Hook, who had fought through the hospital evacuation, and Surgeon Reynolds, who had treated wounded under fire, became national heroes overnight. But they had earned their fame through 12 hours of unimaginable courage. But the real victory wasn't the medals. It was proving that courage can literally change the world. Love stories like this that show the incredible power of human courage and determination? Then you absolutely need to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our explorations into history's most inspiring moments. Drop a comment below, telling us what other incredible historical battles or acts of heroism you'd like us to cover next. The night the wall didn't fall at Rorke's Drift proved that empires aren't built just on superior firepower, but on the willingness of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when history calls their name.